Well, kia ora, we're here today to make a significant pre-budget announcement. Standing where we are right now, it's hard to imagine that it wasn't that many months ago that this basin here was completely full of water. We made the commitment when we came up here immediately after the cyclone that we would support the communities affected by the cyclone and by flooding through the recovery effort. That was never going to be an overnight recovery effort. It's one that's going to take some time. And you've seen already a significant level of investment from the government in helping to support these communities to recover, and we want to continue that momentum today. First though, I want to acknowledge the Cyclone Recovery Minister, Grant Robertson, who's here, who's also the Finance Minister, so busy week ahead for him. Can I acknowledge my ministerial colleagues who are leading various parts of the cyclone recovery across the country, and can I also acknowledge our local members of Parliament who are here, Stuart Nash and Anna Lork. I can tell you that there aren't many weeks go past where they haven't been pounding on the table and bashing the door down to share the messages that have been important to these communities here. So particularly want to acknowledge Anna and Stuart. Thank you for being here with us in Hawke's Bay today. Today's announcement is a significant one. We're more than doubling the funding that we've already put into the cyclone recovery with an extra $1 billion in funding through this year's budget. It's part of an ongoing program of work to provide the funding that's needed to support these communities affected by recent extreme weather to recover from them. There's a big emphasis today on rebuilding our infrastructure, particularly around transport, but also looking ahead to how we can better protect communities from these sorts of events in the future. The stop bank here that you see over to my right was recently increased in height through a co-investment between the government and the regional council, and can I acknowledge the regional council's representatives who are here today. Without that, there would have been much more extensive flooding on the other side of it. Raising the stop bank prevented a widespread flooding and potentially devastation, and my understanding, I've seen the photos, is that the water from where we're standing right now got almost to the top of that extended stop bank. So it was a good investment and well worth doing, and it's the sort of thing that we will need to see more of. So there's $100 million in funding for flood protection in the announcement that we're making today. Some significant investment in our road and rail infrastructure. We know that the damage there has been extensive. We know that it's going to take some time to repair, so we want to keep that momentum going. We've already announced the first instalment of funding. Much of that funding's already been flowing out the door to get those essential transport links restored. Today we're announcing a significant additional package of support for that. We acknowledge the social impact that these natural disasters have on communities. So there's a significant emphasis on that in the package of funding that we're announcing today, and that includes funding for our health and education systems, and importantly more mental health support, recognising the toll that these sorts of events take on the community. One of the programs, for example, that we're extending to this region, Mana Ake, was actually put in place following the Canterbury earthquakes to support young people with their mental health and resilience. It's a successful program, and by extending it into those communities that have been most affected by the recent extreme weather, we can make sure that we're supporting the psychological effect that has on our youngest New Zealanders. And so there's more detail on that in today's announcement as well. And then of course continuing to support the community groups who have been helping to lead both the response and the recovery effort. There's a lot of work ahead, and we want to make sure that those community groups are being supported as well. So we made some commitments immediately after the cyclone that we would stand by these communities, we would see this through, and we would help them to recover and to rebuild. Today's announcement is further evidence that we are actually going to deliver on that commitment. We've already put in a very significant investment of funding in a very short space of time. We're more than doubling that today, and we know that over time we'll need to continue to stand by these communities, continue to see through this work so that they can recover and prosper. With that, I'm going to hand over now to the Cyclone Recovery Minister and the Minister of Finance, who will share a few more details.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thanks Prime Minister. Happy Mother's Day to everybody as well. Can I also acknowledge all of my parliamentary and ministerial colleagues, and also particular to the Chair of the Regional Council, Hinawai Ormsby. Thank you for being here, and I know you're going to say a few words after I've spoken as well. It is really appropriate that Hinawai is here because we committed from day one that this would be a locally led, centrally supported recovery and rebuild. There are a lot of lessons that we've learned, unfortunately for New Zealand, over the last few years when it comes to how we deal with natural disasters, and that's one of them. We want to be here as the partner to this region and other regions that have been impacted by the cyclones and the Auckland anniversary weekend floods. But we know that the real knowledge about what needs to be done lies here in the region, and so I'm really proud of what we've done. It's not easy. There are lots of different things and different hurdles to get over, but we are very, very much committed to that. And that's why it is appropriate to be here today, because this stop bank was funded through what is colloquially known as the Shovel Ready program, and that was a partnership funding program. So I believe we put about $12 million in, and anyway we'll be able to tell you exactly how much the council put in, but a similar amount or just slightly less. And that partnership approach is what underpins where we go from here in our ongoing recovery and rebuild. So, as the Prime Minister's indicated, one part of our announcement today is a $100 million fund for co-investment for flood protection in the impacted areas from the cyclone and the floods. I want to emphasise the point that's 1 year's worth of funding, and so we will over the next few years inevitably be adding to that. But as we identify where the best places to go are, we can do that. But 100 million for 1 year, I can assure you, is a lot of money, especially when it's a co-investment fund with other councils around the country as well as here in the Hawke's Bay. As the Prime Minister's also indicated, a big chunk of what we're announcing today is on core public infrastructure. And that's the job of government. Our job is to make sure that the road network, the rail network, electricity, water, all those basic things that are needed are there for people. We're acutely aware of the impact that these weather events have had on communities and on businesses, and the basics of being able to get where you need to go for your work, for your family, for your health needs, for your education needs is critically important. And so in the package today we've got nearly another $500 million worth of support for our road and rail network. We've already put in significant amounts of resources, and here we're also not just doing the work of state highways but also local roads. About 60% of the funding that's already gone out the door in transport has been on local roads, which otherwise would be a cost impost on local councils. I think about 91% of all the work that's been done so far on local roads has actually been funded by central government, and we understand that that's something we can do. The roads all interconnect with one another, so it doesn't make much sense for us to fix a state highway and then a local road not to be fixed. So that's a way in which this announcement takes pressure off the local councils when they've got a lot of pressure on them. And it's a work in progress, but I think we saw with the reopening around State Highway 2 and the connection for the people of Wairoa just today how important these kinds of networks are, and they form a big part of this package. Also, as the Prime Minister's indicated, there is a big focus in our announcement today on the social side of the recovery and rebuild. Just here in the Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti region there are 80 schools that need significant repairs or rebuilds. We've got that replicated in a number of other regions around New Zealand, so there's a significant package of funding today to do that work. Some of it's covered by insurance, but actually a lot isn't. And even that is covered by insurance, we're not going to have those schools have to wait to get that insurance payment before we actually do the repairs and the rebuilds that are needed. So that is an important part of the social infrastructure of these communities. Many schools were the hubs in the immediate aftermath of the floods, and so it's a recognition there too as well. Also in the health area, a significant investment both in the mental health area, and I just want to emphasise again our understanding of the importance of that. In this community there have been some tragedies in the wake of the cyclones, and I want to recognise the families and the communities affected by that. We want people to reach out. The 1737 helpline exists for everybody. We have more access now for people through their GPs to primary mental health care, but we know we need to do more, and the extension of the Mana Ake program is for primary and intermediate school children, because that is a lesson from Canterbury that the impacts might not show up even straight away, but they're significant and we need to make sure we support them. There's also funding to make sure that health services can continue to be provided right across the impacted communities. We know in the Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti particularly, also in Northland, there have been some real issues for people getting to health services if they're in isolated communities. So there's additional funding in this package for air ambulances, for all-terrain vehicles, for people to be able to get there, repairs for some of the services where our elderly are looked after, damage in some of the rest homes and hospital care facilities that work with our elderly. So that is a part of it. Along with significant community development. Areas of work that are underway that obviously are not covered in this package but are clearly part of the next steps. The first of those is what we do about severely affected locations. So you'll be aware of the announcement we made towards the end of last week on the timeline for that work. That is an incredibly important piece of work. I know and I absolutely understand the desire for certainty that people have about their properties and their communities. We've got to make sure we make the right decision as well as the quickest decision, and so we have a timeline for that work now. We're working very closely with the Regional Council on that. What we've done is facilitated bringing the data of insurers and the Regional Council together to be able to provide a comprehensive and quality assured risk assessment, and we will be out towards the end of the month in early June talking to communities about what that looks like. It's a challenging process, but it's one we've got to get right. Following on from that is the inevitable question of if people do have to relocate, or if more work like stop banks need to be done, who pays for that? And that's the piece of work that we're working our way through now, and obviously there are different models for how that works. So that support and funding is part of our ongoing work. The other area is around sector and regional recovery plans. So obviously a significant amount of money has already gone in to support businesses, our growers and our farmers to be able to do things like remediate buildings, remove silt and so on, and we just had an additional package about silt and debris removal announced just last week to be able to carry that work on. Those sector plans, and I think here particularly of the likes of the horticulture sector, are significant. We have had a couple of reports now from the sector and the Ministry of Primary Industries as well. And the commitment that I can make today is that over the next few weeks we will work with those sectors on options for how we support that recovery. We are a committed partner in doing this, but I think everyone will understand that the government can't pay for every dollar of a recovery or a rebuild of a sector, because sadly these weather events are happening more and more often. What we can do is work out ways that we can make sure the sector can rebuild and recover, and that piece of work is ongoing, and we will cover off more of that in future announcements. So it's still the rolling maul, but this is a pretty significant rolling maul, sort of like a Crusaders one that I saw last night, which is actually making sure, that by, as the Prime Minister said, more than doubling what we have done shows that we have this ongoing commitment, but it isn't the end. We'll be back here often to make sure that these communities can recover well and rebuild strongly into the future.